she's staring at.
So, in a bit of a surprise drop, the first week of June saw the 5 Mega Man games grace the Nintendo Switch Online Game Boy gimmick, and well, for reasons beyond my comprehension, I decided to revisit these games for review purposes. Oh wait, there is a reason. The first 3 games were reviewed a decade ago, and those videos are kinda shit. So, let's do them again. First off, we got Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge, or just Mega Man as the title screen says, released in 1991 for the Game Boy by Capcom, with the same cover art shared with the original Mega Man on MS-DOS, and Mega Man 3 had a similar pose, but I digress. Anyway, Mega Man 1 on Game Boy, much like Mega Man 1 on the original NES, is the simplistic and most basic of the bunch, but establishes a couple trends that other games would follow. We begin with the traditional stage select screen, letting you pick one of 4 stages occupied by 4 returning robot masters from the original Mega Man game, with Bomb Man and Guts Man left on the sideline due to their master weapons being somewhat situational at best and flat out useless at worst. Okay, hold on, we gotta do this one thing before we move on. Okay, get ready, okay. It's Guts Man. Dun-na. Okay, that's about covers it. Next. Once all 4 robot masters are cleared, it's off to Wily Castle, where at the end of a fairly lengthy level, you'll reach the famed teleport room where you'll fight 4 more robot masters, this time for Mega Man 2, who will also drop their master weapons upon defeat that can be used for exactly 1 level and a couple boss fight afterwards. Once you've defeated them, you'll face off against the game's exclusive, until Mega Man 10 boss, Mega Man Killer Anchor, who will drop his vital Mirror Buster shield weapon thing upon defeat, which opens the door to the 6th and final level of the game. So yes, Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge is a short romp at only 6 levels, which, if you think about it, mirrors Mega Man 1 on NES, which only had 10 levels as opposed to, well, more than that with the games beyond. Speaking of Mega Man 1, gameplay more or less matches that game in terms of your basic abilities. You have no slide, no charge shot, E-tanks, or rush accessories. The only accessory you gain is a temporary platform called Carry, and you only get that upon defeating the initial 4 robot masters. The game does feature a password system for the sake of convenience, and that pretty much rounds out the overall package. But while Dr. Wily's Revenge has elements and mechanics from the first 2 NES games, enemies, weapons, bosses, and music, by no means is this a port of those 2 games. The 6 stages you navigate are newly created, and while there are some familiar foes and hazards, there are also some new hazards for you to contend with. Naturally, levels are generally more cramped due to the lower screen real estate, but never to the extent where spacing is at a premium and level design feels limiting. The only time you might feel the tightness is in boss fights due to being in much smaller rooms, but even then, it's still fairly manageable. Control on Mega Man is as tight as ever. No slippery feeling unless it was on ice, no extra step or lag, and while lemons move a bit slow, they're never too detrimental. Mega Man also retained a slow ladder climb that would be a thing for the entire run of Game Boy sequels, which adds a bit of urgency in climbing segments, something that was lacking in the NES titles once Mega Man 3 let you climb ladders faster than the speed of light. And yeah, 6 levels does make for a short game, but considering this was early Game Boy and handheld gaming was largely seen as something done in short bursts at the time, it's not that much of a deal breaker, and those well versed in Mega Man play can probably clear this in less than half an hour. Graphically speaking, Mega Man makes the transition from NES to Game Boy pretty smoothly, I think. Despite the lesser resolution and lack of color, virtually every sprite that was on the NES and made the transition to Game Boy was brought over with little to no loss in detail or scale. Mega Man animates as well as he did originally, Big Eyes retained their massive girth, as do some of the mid-sized foes like Sniper Joes or those Flame Tosser things from 2, level layouts are clean and detailed looking, and while speed is generally slower than the NES games, it's not sluggishly slow, just enough that it won't blur on an OG Game Boy screen, which is a nice thing to have. That said, the game does suffer from bouts of slowdown and flicker when too much is going on at once, and this is something of an ailment for the rest of the run on the Game Boy. The game is also equally impressive on the sound front. Sound effects aren't quite emulating the NES sound effects, but they're not bad, and I like that you have different sounds for enemy hits and kills, something you didn't get on the NES side with the exception of Mega Man 5. And of course, you have the obligatory superb musical bits, remixed versions of classic robot themes from Mega Man 1 to go along with some original tracks that are equally superb, the first Wily stage theme being a particular favorite, but the second stage isn't too bad either. Overall, Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge is a superb debut for the Blue Bomber on the Game Boy. And despite being a short game, it does a fine enough job of adapting the core gameplay onto the portable format and with very little compromise, which might not seem like a big deal, but I've seen Capcom convert some of their Disney titles from NES to Game Boy, and none of them made the transition quite as smoothly as Mega Man did in his first outing. Now of course there'd be other Mega Man games gracing the Game Boy that blows this one out of the water, the next one being the sole exception, but those games needed a solid foundation to build upon, and Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge fulfilled that need quite nicely. Well worth checking out if you haven't already.